This is Dr. Kraus with a second video on Introduction to Raspberry Pi. I specifically want to talk about an introduction to Linux and the Bash terminal, and you will be quizzed on this material. So, first of all, when I use the term terminal, I would also interchangeably use that with shell. Those are not really two different words in my mind. Specifically in Linux, we generally mean the bash shell, which is pretty similar to the terminal in a Mac. And I guess it's now been folded into Windows 10 has a bash shell. So most people are a lot more comfortable with a graphical GUI desktop mouse focused interface, and certainly Raspbian Stretch supports that. So why not just use that? Mostly the shell of the terminal is just a whole lot more powerful and more efficient than using a mouse. There are, I spelled hundreds wrong, but there are hundreds of shell commands available that give you a lot of power to do various things. And even though up until now in class we have run our Python code inside a Jupyter Notebook, you can also run Python code as standalone scripts. You can even export scripts from the Jupyter Notebook, and that just brings out a lot of power. And additionally, there's some aspects of using VNC that are sometimes a little bit annoying if you can't get an optimal compromise between graphic resolution and desktop size versus network speed and that kind of thing. There's always just going to be a little bit of network lag. And so SSH and then logging in and starting a Cherry Pi or a Flask server might be cleaner and faster than using VNC. So I think there's a lot of reasons. I want you to know at least the basics, just so you can kind of get around inside your Raspberry Pi and check on and fix various things and that kind of thing. So there's an interesting story about this on linuxcommand.org. I guess somebody was having a problem, some company was having a problem with their server, and they were trying to figure out which users or whatever was just sucking up a lot of space. And someone spent an entire day trying to write a C++ program to diagnose all of this. And it turns out the problem can be solved with one line typed into the terminal if you know what you're doing. So DU stands for disk use, and then -S for sort, and they piped that to some other program and then saved it to a text file. And that's all it would take if you knew how to run command terminals well. So there's a lot of power available to you on the terminal, and I want you to know how to tap into at least a little bit of it. As I mentioned, I think it's a lot more efficient than using a mouse. Some of your fancy pants mouses might have, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 10 buttons nowadays, and you got some scroll wheels and some other things. But you'd be hard pressed to get more than 10, or in a really stretchy situation, 20 inputs from a mouse. Your keyboard has more than 100 keys, and if you can type even just 3 letters like a license plate in succession, even if you just stuck with lowercase letters, 3 letters is 2 to the 26 to the third possibilities, or 17,576. So there's just a whole lot you can do. Like I said, I think the biggest thing though is there's just so many really thought out, really powerful commands or little programs that run from the shell, and you just need to know how to tap into those. The general format is that you have some command, and then you may have some optional flag type arguments, and then positional arguments. So for example, ls is for listing the contents of a directory. So if I happen to have Raspberry Pi open, and I open a terminal, and I type ls, this is everything that is in my home directory, but I could also say just show me the Python files, or just show me, if there are any, the IPython notebooks. But I can also, there are some things that by default are hidden. Anything that has a dot in front of it is just supposed to be at least somewhat hidden. And so I can do the dot thing to show the minus ALH. It should show all in a long, so I could just do a show all. And then the long format means show me the timestamps and the permissions and all those kind of things. And then human readable means take especially the sizes and convert them to kilobytes or gigabytes. But I can also combine that. So now I'm looking at the sizes and modification dates for all the IPython notebooks in my home folder. So ls, various command flags, and positional arguments. So star.py would be a positional argument, and minus ALH are flags. So the essential commands, you need to know ls, cd, pwd, man, I guess, and find can be really, really powerful. So let's talk about each of those. We just kind of did ls, list the contents of the current directory. Anything that starts with a dot is initially hidden, so the minus a flag reveals those. And then the asterisk is a wildcard. You can have more than one asterisk if you would like. And to me, it's always ls or ls minus ALH. I just always use those three flags together, or ls star dot something, and so on. And then cd is change directory. So if I'm here, all the things in blue are directories. So I can, again, take advantage of tab completion, but I can cd down into this, and then I can list the contents of that directory, but I might be like, okay, I forgot where I am. So pwd, and then if I was in some kind of symbolic link to something, I could do a negative, we'll talk about symbolic links in just a second. A negative capital P says, tell me the whole path to where I am, expanding any symbolic links that might be included. And then the other thing that's nice about cd, so cd and then space and the name of a folder takes you into that folder, but cd by itself takes you home. And again, I'm taking advantage of tab completion. cd takes me home no matter how buried I am or where I was. Even if I'm down here somewhere, cd takes me back to my home directory. And the home directory is /home/pi because the username is pi by default for the Raspberry Pi. So that is cd. Again, very much important to take advantage of tab completion, especially if you have long folder names. pwd is print the working directory, and the one flag you should be aware of is the negative or dash capital P or flag capital P in case you're ever in a symbolic link. Man is the command for showing the manual. The only problem is they tend to be a bit on the verbose side. So this is man ls. For example, the negative a flag says do not ignore entries that start with a dot. And then there's just a whole bunch apparently of other flags you could learn about. So on and so forth. So there's the human readable flag, and then there's like apparently 600 other flags to really, really, really be able to list the contents of your directory in any way that you would like. So man is really powerful, but also somewhat verbose, sometimes a little too much detail. Find, the cool thing about find is that it is a recursive searcher. So if I came over here and said I want to find dot, meaning the current directory, anything whose name starts with .txt, for example. And it's going to search every directory and find all txt matches. And those are all the Python files that match. Apparently there's a lot of stuff in some hidden local folder that I didn't know about. Or all the IPython notebooks in all of my subdirectories. And so just a really, really powerful way to search every subdirectory recursively. So that's the most common form there, is the find, which directory to search, and then options such as -name star.py. So some other commands you might find useful: CP for copy, MV for move, RM for remove, mkdir for making a directory, creating a new folder, that is, LN for symbolic link, chmod for changing the, what does mod stand for? Basically, you use that to allow a file to be executable, for example, and then you can change the owner of a file or folder as well. So if I had some path, I've got untitled dot whatever whatever, so I can copy that to some other directory like so. So cp old path new path. There's a -r flag. If you're trying to use this on a folder, you have to do it recursively. And then moving, if I just want to, so I copied a folder, but if I just wanted to move it into a new folder, I could move that to some other folder like so, although apparently I screwed that up. There we go. So now it no longer exists in this folder, but it exists in this directory and the second one there. So move, old path, new path, and then RM deletes a folder, or sorry, a file. So I could come in here and just remove that guy. By default, if you try to remove a directory, it'll warn you, but if you did a -r, it would remove the directory recursively along with everything that was underneath it or inside of it. And if you really want to get wild and crazy, a -rf combination is basically to nuke a folder, and I don't care why. Basically you're saying ignore any reason why this is a bad idea, but make sure you know what you're doing before you bust out the RM -rf. And as I mentioned, makedir is just the name of the new folder. So if I said makedir new folder, I would then have a new folder. Now, granted, some of these things you can do from the file manager, and there's a file explorer that's just like the one you would have in any other operating system, whatever. But it's more powerful to do certain things from the command line. So I just want you to be aware of some of these basic commands. And then ln creates a symbolic link. So if I said ln, so I'm going to link down to that third dir and call it d3 link, I guess. Whoops. I need to say that I want it to be a symbolic link with a -s flag. There we go. So now I can go all the way down to here, and it looks like at first glance that I'm just one directory down. But if I do a pwd -p, it's a shortcut, but it's a shortcut that plays nicely with command line things. So that's where I really am. And so I think you get the idea. So symbolic linking can be really powerful, especially if you need a folder or file to be in multiple places at once. You can just create one copy and then symbolically link it to wherever you want it to be. And then chmod changes the mode, I guess, of a file, making it executable. So you can create a lot of really powerful shell scripts in Linux, and it's just a text file containing some code. You could even take a Python script and make it executable. So it's just code until you change, or just a text file until you change its permissions to allow execution. So chmod a+rx means anybody can read or execute this file. Permissions in a Linux file system are actually a pretty serious thing, as opposed to some operating systems. Although on the Raspberry Pi, you can just type sudo, S-U-D-O, super user do, and kind of do anything. On most Linux operating systems besides Raspberry Pi or Raspbian, sudo requires you to type in the password, and the person executing that command has to be on a list of people who are allowed to do sudo. But with Raspbian, it doesn't even bother to ask for your permissions because there's just a lot of things you need to sudo, and so you just kind of get permission to do them. So in addition to this, A plus RX, meaning anybody has permission to read and execute. You can specifically, so in Linux, the world is broken into 3 groups of people: the owner of a file, certain groups of users, and then anybody. And so 777 would mean that anybody can read, write, and execute the file. 755 means that the owner has read, write, and execute permissions. Everyone else has just read and execute. And then you can also, there's a negative capital R for recursively modifying the properties of a folder and everything inside that folder. And so a chmod negative R 755 in the name of a folder would make everything in that folder and below that folder readable and executable to everybody. And then if for some reason you had a file that either you created that you now want to pass permissions, ownership permissions over to root, let's see if I can demo this. So if I went to, oops, dir1, dir2, so there's a file, and it is currently owned by Pi and created by Pi. I could say chown my file. You would think I could. I'm not feeling good about my tab completion here. Am I getting it wrong? Is it not the... Oh, it's the user and then the file name. Okay, so that's why. So if I said I want root to now be the owner of that file, apparently I need to be... So I had to sudo super user do it. Okay, so now that file is owned by root, and if I tried to edit it, it would tell me that I couldn't, but then I could also give the ownership back to, oh, you're killing me. Ugh, it's late. Okay, that, and now it is once again owned by Pi. So that's nice. Yeah, so those are the basic Linux commands, as I said. I expect you to know what each of these does. So ls, cd, pwd, man, and find. And then the other ones were cp, mv, rm, makedir, ln, chmod, and chown. Thanks.